In this video, I'm going to be taking you through how you can sign your first no-code agency client for $20,000 or more as a beginner. If that sounds impossible, definitely not, because I'm going to be giving you real life examples and taking you through my process on how I've done exactly this a number of times already. I'll break the entire thing down from you, from how to find and actually land your first clients, to then how to actually deliver a project successfully, and how you can actually improve your revenue and margins in the future after you've got this kind of process down pat. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the channel, my name's Adam, and I've made over $80,000 as a freelancer on Upwork and delivered over 50 projects. And through those learnings and that experience, I then went on to develop my own no-code agency called APG Software Solutions. We've built over 60 applications for clients all over the globe. And in that time, I've learned a lot about how to win, sell, plan, and deliver projects, all using low-code solutions. And that's what I'm going to share with you in this video. Now, first up, we're going to talk about sales avenues and where you can actually find the kind of clients that are looking for these projects. So the top one, and where I really started, is freelancing platforms. So those include Upwork, Contra, Fiverr. There's plenty of especially smaller companies and startup founders flocking to these kind of platforms, looking to get their application built. And there's definitely clients that have the budget of $20,000. Although I will say there's a lot of clients that will have smaller budgets than that as well. It's a great spot to start, but for consistently landing projects over that 20K mark, you might have to move on to another platform later down the line. Some of the other ones include LinkedIn and Twitter. Now, I've definitely had a few jobs come through LinkedIn. And I think as you develop yourself a little bit further, there can be a lot more opportunities that come from people that use LinkedIn and Twitter effectively to post what they do and what kind of services they offer. Other common ones include the Bubble forum. I build on a low-code tool called Bubble, or forums related to the tools that you build on. You can also look at job boards like LinkedIn's job boards, Seek, Indeed, and so forth. And you can also build a personal brand like I'm currently doing, and like Liam Otley, who inspired this channel, also does. We've also found that partnering with startup accelerators, and any accelerator is a really good place to go, because those founders tend to have budget and they're also building applications and they want to build really quickly. And so no-code or low-code solutions are really suitable for them. Now, once you've found one avenue or multiple avenues to clients that are looking to build products with low code, next up is sales calls and how do you actually pitch your pricing model and pitch your services. Taking a look around at the other agencies and also how we do things, I've found there's two main pricing models. One is fixed price projects and two is sprint-based pricing. There'd be others out there, but I found that these are the two main approaches. Building from scratch, we do prefer fixed price because it incentivizes us to improve the efficiency of our agency and how well we deliver projects, because that's going to lead to increased margins. If we go based on sprint-based pricing and we charge based on an hourly contract, which is how we usually do sprints, then we're not incentivized to get any more efficient because we are getting paid on an hourly basis. So it's safer because there's less risk in terms of scope creep, but in terms of being able to make more profit on projects, it doesn't give us that opportunity. So we like to have kind of like a hybrid blend between the two pricing models. In this video, we're going to be talking about mainly building apps from scratch because those tend to be the largest budget applications. So fixed price is usually what we opt for in these scenarios. But failure to set up a fixed price contract correctly can lead to scope creep and can actually leave you out of pocket a lot of money if you don't get a couple things right. So the next step is really important in terms of how do we scope and actually break down these projects effectively to make sure that we're actually earning a decent profit margin on the projects that we're delivering on. Now, I've got scoping and breakdown here above planning, but in reality, often we actually do the planning phase before we do the scoping and breakdown. Usually the way we charge for a project in that $20,000 realm is we'll charge an upfront fixed deposit for a discovery and design phase. And that's usually about 20 or 30 hours. We usually say between $1,000 to $1,500. And what we do there is we build you a design file so that we can better understand your projects and problem you're actually trying to solve. And then we can build a really comprehensive scope. So what you're looking at here is our discovery phase. And so you'll see here what we're doing is we're trying to understand the client's problem, because often you'll find when you go to pitch these projects, sometimes the client isn't even 100% sure what they actually want. So we really like to get as much of that down on paper. So when we go to build this thing, it's completely clear what we're building. So you'll see here down the bottom, pretty self-explanatory. We've got our brand guidelines and our branding kit, things like your logos, your colors, and all that kind of stuff. It's really good to just get that sorted out at the start of the project so that you're not changing styles and all that kind of stuff as you go through. That can be really time inefficient. Up the top here, we've got a number of different sections. We've got project overview, problem statement, goals, features, list of pages, roles and access levels, and then user flows. And I'll take you through each of these briefly. Also, this entire kit will be available in the description. And also, if you head over to our community, I'm going to make it available there. You can ask me questions and maybe even make suggestions on things that you might have learned could possibly go well on that design phase to help you narrow down that scope as clearly as possible. So project overview, we've got the basics, project name, description, target audience, and purpose. And mainly what we're trying to understand here is what is the problem you're actually trying to solve. Next up, we have the problem definition. Again, kind of supports that project overview and the impact of the problem. And then we have the goals. So what are we trying to solve with this product? What features will be involved? List of pages, which is really important, so we can start to get an idea of the pages that will be within the application and kind of like a sitemap. Roles, so what kind of user roles will be in here? Often you'll have like admin user roles, super admin user roles, sometimes project manager user roles, or different kind of user roles that define the privacy rules around your data in the application and who can see what and also who can do what within, especially for dashboards and CRMs and stuff like that. And then user flows. Now, this might look mundane and maybe a little bit over the top for scoping out a project, and you might not want to make a client go through all this because it seems a lot simpler than that. This is unnecessary. Believe me, I'd highly recommend doing it, because things that can seem really basic, you can get halfway through a project and then realize that there's a lot more under the hood, and that your idea of what the client wanted was different to what was actually in their head or their idea, and they may not have catered that effectively to you, or maybe you didn't receive it well enough. And so having it all down on paper here really clearly just gives you like a single source of truth, so that as you're going through the project, if things change and maybe client requests you skipped something, you can come back to this document and be like, hey, look, we didn't actually scope this out in this document. You know, we can definitely add this in, but I don't think it was in our initial scope. Kind of gives you an extra layer of protection against scope creep. In the worst case scenario that things start to change pretty drastically within your project midway through the build, you are tied to a fixed price, that wherever possible. Now, with this design phase completed, now you're in a really good position to develop a proposal. Now, our proposals typically involve a title page, a cover page, some testimonials and all that kind of stuff up the top, just to look nice that you are sending them a large sum of money, almost like a piece of marketing material, but also with some pretty important financial information. So we like to kind of format it nicely and be proud of what we send over, I guess. Now, outside of the fluffy stuff and the nice looking stuff, we have some key information. So we have the project summary. This really talks about the start date, the end date, and the total cost to your project. So really the core things that they need to know about this project right there in the project summary. Underneath that, you then have your solutions and your deliverables. So we have a software which we use to kind of break down some of the key solutions and deliverables. Now, this is for a really basic project. Underneath that, we have a rough schedule. So we have the milestone completion dates and also the percentage of the total price due on those dates. And then we have a basic terms and pricing breakdown. So we have the different deliverables that we'll be breaking down, and then, you know, your subtotal, any discounts that are relevant, and your grand total. And I'd recommend having under that, if you've got some handover and post-launch support, some information on that, so the client knows once this initial project is pushed live, you know, what are the conditions after that? What are the conditions for handover and all of those kind of things. Now, once you've got that initial phase, we call it discovery done, you understand the problem and you've got some really clear documentation on what that problem looks like and how you're going to solve it. Your next step is often to design it in Figma, so that when you go to build, it's a lot quicker. Basically creates an interactive version of your application, which is so useful on so many levels, and I've talked about that in other videos. But really briefly, kind of touch over what that looks like. Build this giant file, you can comment back and forth, iterate, get feedback from the client, and you can build these files depending on the complexity, typically between 20 and 50 hours to build a complete design file. And in my opinion, that repays itself at least 5 times when you actually go to build, in terms of reducing that scope for error again, reducing the ambiguity or the unknownness around a project, and it makes it so much easier for your developers to jump in there and know exactly what they're doing. Once you've got that design file completed, you can then move on to the actual development. Now, we build in a low-code tool called Bubble, but there's a bunch of other low-code tools out there that are relatively full stack. We've found that Bubble is the most full stack, and it allows us to build full-scale, scalable MVPs in 4 to 8 weeks, which we really haven't been able to do on any other software. That being said, there's a million ways to solve a problem. I'm sure there's other people out there that would recommend using other low-code tools to kind of solve these problems. But for us, we found that Bubble's super powerful, and that's the one that we choose to build 95% of our software products with. Now, the reason we put so much importance on that planning phase, or our discovery phase and our design phase, is because technology is typically really well known for blowing out a budget and taking forever. I've personally heard a lot of horror stories about this, and I've also been in situations that other companies had real life experience on what can go wrong in tech, and you can kind of end up in this never-ending wasteland. There's so many things that can go wrong. And as an agency, our mission is to avoid all of that. And so we found that with a really detailed planning process and discovery phase, we can avoid ending up in the never-ending wasteland of tech where the requirements are unclear, we've blown out on scope and budget, the agency's out of pocket, the client's unhappy, all of those things that you hear about in that agency tech. That's the reason we put so much importance on this, because we found that we have a really good success in terms of delivering projects within clients' expectations using this this method. When we go to build, we typically build it in 4 to 8 weeks. Now, depending on the complexity, it can be longer than that. There's also external factors. Sometimes clients have to wait for information. Sometimes we have to wait for the app to get wrapped on app stores and stuff like that. There's all sorts of things that can push that back, but that's typically the time range that we shoot for in delivering these projects. Now, once you get to the end of that development phase, typically the way I think all software development works is you have 80% of a project kind of complete pretty quickly, and that last 20% can really drag out. And the reason for that is it's those little fidgety bugs. The client can get pretty picky about cleaning this up and making all of the pieces of the puzzle fit together nicely. That can actually take a while. And so we kind of call that phase the piloting phase or the testing phase, whatever you want to call it. And it's like, how do you best handle that to deliver a project to market? And typically we use a Trello board process or some sort of ticketing process. We give the client a number of iterations. We develop all of the core functionality first and make sure the app flows correctly. And then we give them a chance to jump in there, test it themselves, and just flood the Trello board with all of the little UI UX improvements, anything else that they really want to change within the app. We try and give them 1 or 2 of those and kind of get the project to a place where it's stable, it's been tested thoroughly, and we can then push it to market. And that's really our start to end kind of development process in terms of how we build these apps for clients. And the budget really does justify itself because it's a large job. Traditionally, tech was build an app. Some of the apps that we're building for this budget and in this time frame typically took 6 figures and 6 to 12 months plus. In this startup landscape where so many startups fail, that's a basic statistic. I think it's 90%, don't quote me on that. In that startup landscape, which is so risky and so difficult to get in, being able to build a product in that kind of speed and for that budget, so valuable. And that's where we've seen this kind of real niche market kind of open up. The last thing I'll talk about is, once you deliver these projects, how do you actually increase your profit margins and how do you get better? Because it's one thing to be able to deliver these projects, but especially if you're starting out, you might find that the first project that you actually sign for this amount of money, you may not make that much profit on it, depending on which developers you're using, if you're building it yourself. And if it's your first project, you're likely to make a lot of mistakes in that dev process. And so how do you actually get better at that? And how do you improve your profit rate or your margins on these kind of projects? Now, we found there's 2 ways to do this, and we're actively still working on both. So one is a framework which you build on. Now, when we build on Bubble, we call it our UI kit or our framework, but it is more than that. Basically a standard application that you build all of your applications off. So in that standard application, you might standardize a lot of features that are common to a lot of the app types that you build. So for example, authentication is one. Most of the apps we build have some sort of authentication, sign up, login layer. So if we can standardize that and build a best practice working example of that in an application and duplicate it, saves us having to set that up every single time we build a new application. In addition to that, things like admin dashboards, but also setting up kind of best practices in terms of the core styles that you have within an application. And a lot of the core features, things like my profile pages, things like basic list and table views and all that kind of stuff. We like to build a comprehensive library of those components in our app so that when we go to build new projects, if we've already built a messaging system before, we've already built a dashboard before, we've already built a profile page before, instead of having to reinvent the wheel every single time, can we use components of our past projects or core components of our past projects to help us deliver more reliable components for our newer projects in a quicker time frame? Now, that's one thing. The other thing is niching down your product offering as an agency. And what do I mean by that? Basically, you can be a complete software development agency that handles any problem that clients bring to you. But the issue with that is sometimes you can get all sorts of weird and wonderful problems that are pretty much completely unrelated to the problem that the next client that comes through your door is bringing you. And the thing about that is difficult to build a scalable agency when you're just solving different problems. I think the most successful agencies find one problem and get really good at solving that. And so what you can niche down to is specific application types you just get really good at handling. And some of the application types that you could niche down in and we're looking to niche down in, we found the 3 most common types are SaaS applications, marketplaces, and CRMs and dashboards really. So if you can effectively kind of niche down into a smaller product offering, it's going to increase your experience in that product offering for a start, but it's also going to increase the kind of tools that you have to solve that problem. You're going to get better at solving that problem, probably going to get quicker at solving that problem. By quicker usually means cheaper. So you're going to increase your profit margins. You're going to be better at selling because you understand the kind of problems better and all of that. So that's another kind of approach to niching down your agency and increasing the profit margins or the profit percentage on the projects that come through the door. Now, I hope you found that video useful. And if you're interested in following more of my journey on running agencies, freelancing, no-code, and AI, feel free to subscribe to the channel because there's going to be a lot more content in that direction coming out soon. Cheers for watching and have a good one.